Welcome to the Bleep Bulimia podcast with guest Emma Lyons, trauma-informed healer and founder of Trauma Matrix.
Hello, everyone. I am Lorianne. I am the host of Bleep Bulimia, and today I have Emma Lyons with me. She is a trauma-informed healer and founder of the Trauma Matrix. Very interesting topic today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Good to be here, Lorianne. Thanks so much for having me on.
So, as I said to you before the show, please tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came about to speak to this topic.
Well, from a young age, I did with we're talking to people who had bulimia. I definitely did, dabble in that and anorexia and stuff. I was very depressed as a child, but not kind of the invisible kinds of depression that nobody really sees unless they really look. And, all my life I thought, I was the problem. I was kind of brought up with this idea there's something wrong with me. And it wasn't until much later in life that I started looking at the family dynamic. And I started to recognize that my family is actually quite dysfunctional. And all this time I thought I was the problem. Turns out my mom ticks a lot of the boxes of a covert narcissist. Also, my family is very emotionally repressed. When I was a child, I had no one to talk about this with. When I got my period, I had no one to talk to apart from Google. And I was just very lonely and very isolated. And what I realized more recently, really, is that in dysfunctional and narcissistic families, they choose an individual, usually the most sensitive child, to be kind of the scapegoat. And what you do then is you become basically the toilet, the landfill for all the unprocessed intergenerational trauma, shame, all kind of gets dumped on you. And that can lead to a lot of internalized shame that's above and beyond what most people experience. And scapegoats go on to, be scapegoated even into adulthood. It doesn't just end when you turn 18. You continue to kind of attract that kind of energy. And also, as a scapegoat, your life isn't supposed to work. So a lot of scapegoats end up in therapy because their life isn't working, and they think they're the problem. And a lot of scapegoats suffer from depression and things like that. So this is kind of how I started to take it apart, and I realized that this kind of dysfunctional pattern that we see in families of the narcissist or the autocrat, the ruler, the enabling person, and the scapegoat. This is something that you see everywhere in our society. We internalize it into ourselves, which is what I call the inner narcissist. But you see it in families, you see it in corporations, you see it in government systems, you see it in intergovernment systems, people being scapegoated, because the shame that we all carry is so undigestible that we look for a target, or we either project it or we internalize it and self-destruct. And I believe this is what it's shame is one of the core driver of bulimia, and for an awful lot of self-destructive behavior. Also, without this shame voice, I don't believe that anyone would go and take that, commit suicide, for example, because no matter how bad things get in your life, and I've been there myself personally, so I could see, you only think about it if you have that voice inside your head that says you might as well not be here. Otherwise, it would not even cross mind, no matter how dire the situation was. So what I've realized is that I internalized all this shame, and what I can do is I can really separate myself from this shame and release this shame, and become the more you release this inner narcissist or this inner critic that's super critical and super shaming, the more you exercise that thing and release that thing, the less shameable you become to other people. So you become less prone to shame from other people. For example, people come up to you and say you're fat or whatever, you just laugh in their face. You don't let it go in unless you have that voice that resonates. It's kind of the hook for other people's shaming. So this is the real way to freedom. And I started realizing that shame is always toxic. It's the driver of so much dysfunction, pretty much all the dysfunction that I can think of, including addictions and all that kind of thing, because you want to put a pause on that shame. And I realized that shame, it's not like other emotions. It's not like fear or anger, because fear and anger are warning signs that something bad could be around the corner. You need to, hide or get in from the road or whatever it is, or someone's crossing your boundaries. So you've got to be anger. Anger is appropriate there. But shame has no upside whatsoever. Its only exclusive function is about controlling people. And when we internalize this shamer, it's also about control. It's not about care. We're trying to control ourselves, keep ourselves small, keep ourselves in the little box, or this voice is. And it's not natural or native to humans. So we can release this thing. We don't have to live with it. And this is the kind of revolutionary thing that I talk about, because most other people out there that talk about shame, they talk about shame as a normal and natural thing, and that we all have shame as human beings. But what I've realized is that shame is a function of empire, and it's about controlling people, always, always. I mean, if there's a child here that I want to be quiet and I shame him to shut him up, I might fool myself and tell myself I'm doing that for his benefit. But no, I'm doing it for my comfort. And that's always the way with shame. But we're kind of gaslit in our society to believe that shame is somehow a good behavior modifier. And it's absolutely not. When we shame people, people close in. They're less inclined to change their behavior. So shame does the opposite of actually changing. It makes people hide. It makes people less inclined to take responsibility. So it's a very, very poor indicator of changing behavior. And that comes through in our, prison system as well. It's very shaming, and people go out and commit the same crimes again. It doesn't work as a way to change behavior, is what I'm trying to say. But what I'm trying to say here. But we're kind of in this collective trance by our society that tells us, oh, you have to shame yourself in order to be better, in order to improve. And if you look at all aspects of a culture, women, but also men, like the hustle culture, you got to struggle, you got to fight, you got to do the thing. It's very shaming. And women, we've internalized that shame. Or I'm so fat, I'm so ugly, I have too many wrinkles, and we think unconsciously that this is going to make us better, but it actually just makes us shrink and hide and want to disappear. And it's always, always very toxic.
Interesting. I like your terminology of inner narcissism, narcissist, the inner narcissist. Can you just expand on the definition of that a little bit? Because that to me is interesting.
Well, yeah, when I realized that my mom, ticks a lot of these boxes of the narcissist, I was like, wow, this shame voice, this so-called inner critic, it did exactly the same thing to me. It was grandiose. I know best. And it would kind of say, don't get up on that stage. You can't be a singer. You can never do that. And then it would say, oh, I'm trying to protect you. So it's grandiose. It's like it ticks all the boxes of the narcissist, but the call is coming from inside the house. And this is the insidious thing. That's the only distinction, really. If you look at the DSM definition of a narcissist, this internal inner narcissist, as I call it, it ticks all the boxes, but it does it to ourselves. It's kind of coming from inside the body, inside our brain. And so it's not manipulating other people necessarily, although it does use triangulation, like compare, oh, look at you and look at Sarah, she's doing so much better, you're so stupid. And it does that. My voice certainly did. That's triangulation, classic narcissistic strategy, but it does use shaming. It is grandiose. It is manipulative. It ticks every single box of the narcissist, but rather than being external, we've internalized it inside our own head and inside our own body, and it's running our life. And we're told in therapeutic circles that we need to sit down and take this thing to therapy and send it love. And you don't do that with a narcissist out there in the world. That's the wrong thing to do with narcissists, because they will manipulate, they will deflect, they will do all. And it's the same with this narcissist entity, or I talk about it as a parasite. But you know, if you take it to therapy, you send it to love, it actually metastasizes. All of that just gives it more narcissistic supply. And it just grows and it can metastasize, like I said earlier, into something really malignant, where it goes to the point and says, you might as well not be here, you're useless. And that can lead to serious shrinking and, even, at worst, suicide. But we can combat this thing. We don't have to accept this thing. It's not normal. It's an imposition of our culture, and it's like we've internalized the jailer so that no jailer is needed on the outside to keep us down and to keep us in our little place. We do it to ourselves. We internalize the jailer so we stay small. And that's the only thing shame does for us. It's absolutely useless apart from that. And actually just realizing that is very powerful, because so many of us were under this illusion that shame is actually going to help us get better. And it absolutely doesn't. Once you get that, and then you see shame coming and, a shame attack, you can actually diffuse that thing and take back your power from it, because it is not you and it is not there to help you.
So that's interesting. And now, are you, so you speak to how to get over it by, well, first of all, is being aware of it, but do you
Yeah.
help others to do that? Or is there, so I know that you're the founder,
Yes.
and I want to know more about the trauma matrix. That would be interesting to know more about as well. But yeah, I'll just ask you, because if we're not therapy, and I get what you're saying about therapy. I mean, when I was bulimic, I went to everywhere and everywhere.
Therapy is great.
And it,
Therapy is great for awareness, but sometimes a lot of therapy, they tell you that, I mean, I spoke to someone the other day and he was told, oh, you've done lots of good things. Good that you feel shame.
oh,
This is the common conventional wisdom that shaming, and it's even reinforced by our language, Lorianne. You're shameless. You're shameless. You have no shame. That means you're behaving in a way I don't like, or that culture doesn't see as appropriate. So we're linguistic. This thing is linguistically enforced. You need shame in order to be a good human, or else you'll be shameless, which is basically someone who is often acting out of unprocessed shame. A lot of the time, 9 times out of 10, there's unprocessed shame, that they're taking off all their clothes, or maybe they've got really drunk. That's unprocessed shame. They're just acting out from that. Or maybe one time in a million, it might be someone who's being truly authentic, and I just feel triggered by that, and I call them shameless. Because I feel triggered. I mean, because shame is the opposite of authenticity. Can't be authentic if you've got shame that's controlling you. You're fake by definition. That's what shame does to you. It tells you to hide. You shouldn't be seen. There's something wrong with you. You're defective, and we're collectively gaslit and told it's good for you, and it's absolute BS.
wow.
But I do have a system for breaking out of that, which is what you asked about. Sorry, I went off on a bit of a tangent. So I have the break system. I do help women with that. I help people break up with shame. So, but my acronym is BREAK, BREAK. So the first one, B, you've got to break the trance. You've got to recognize that it isn't your voice, that it's a spell, that it's a pattern, that it's like a trance that you're under. And once you catch it, you name it, and that automatically interrupts it. And obviously, you need to know that it's not useful, never beneficial. Then you go on to R, which is refuse to engage with it. So, like I said, you don't take this thing to therapy, you don't send it love. And I talk about Dr. Ramani. Ramani, she's the expert on narcissists. She talks about deep. Don't defend, don't engage, don't explain, and don't personalize. And this is exactly what we need to do when the shame voice or the shame thing, because shame, it's not just a voice, it's like a feeling. It's shame, it's a lethal cocktail of self-loathing, fear, anger turned inwards, all that stuff. It's a lethal cocktail. So you don't defend yourself, you don't engage with it, you don't explain, you just say, not today, it ain't happening, not today, bitch. And you're not talking to yourself there, you're talking to that shame voice, that shame thing. That's not you. Then you expose the lie. So you call it the shame programming. What's it saying? That you're fat, that you're too thin, that you're too ugly, that you've too many wrinkles. This is all shame-based programming. This is all about control. This is not true. What does it mean anyway? And once speaking that truth really disarms its power, then you need to anchor it back into your body, because shame, like no other emotion that I know, that it hijacks your body. It actually takes over your body like no other emotion. Fear a little bit, but like shame is much more immersive. So you've got to come back to your body, feel your breath, plant your feet, say your name, the year, and really remind your nervous system that you're safe, that you're sovereign, and that you're here. That's anchor. And then finally, kick the thing out. That means shake it out, stomp it out, and recognize that it's not yours. And this really does work, but it takes practice sometimes. So if you've been practicing shame and letting that thing run riot over you for 40, 50, 60 years, it's got a head start on you. But that doesn't mean it owns you. And once you start freezing it out, you take back your power, because it's like a light bulb, Larianne. It has no power without you. It gets all its power, all its energy, all its narcissistic supply from you performing, from you defending and engaging with it, or doing what it tells you to do, So you really want to take your power back and just say no to the thing, because it's not you, and it's not trying to help you.
Well, that's interesting too, because as you were talking about, bulimia does have with it a lot of shame. And
yeah, I believe shame is a huge part of that, because you want to disappear, don't you? You feel, yeah, I think shaming is a huge driver of, anorexia, bulimia, all of those things.
Eating disorders in general. So like, I mean, it's looked upon, it's shunned upon for one, but then definitely you hide away. It's against your values because you really don't want to be doing it, but you're doing it anyway. You're hiding, so you're lying. It's all of those things that make you feel even more shame because you have it. And
and shame, well, they talk about shame, it thrives in the dark. So that's better for the shame. That's why we need to be talking about this more, not less.
Yeah.
So when you experience shame, you recognize it, point out that shame. We need to be recognizing this thing and pointing it out for what it is, because it cannot survive really in the daylight once you recognize it and talk about it openly and release all of this shame that we've built up about talking about it. Because, shame, it's not helpful. Never, never, never. It does not help you. It doesn't help you be a better person. It doesn't help you be better looking, it doesn't help you be better in any possible way. It's self-destructive, and you don't owe it anything. You don't owe it anything. So the cool thing is, once you stop giving it power, once you stop feeding it this thing, it's got nothing without you.
so just out of curiosity, it's an odd question, but what's the difference between shame and guilt?
No, it's not an odd question at all. So shame is this belief that I'm bad. Something is wrong with me, okay? And guilt is the feeling or the belief that I've done something bad, okay? And the issue is, in our culture, usually if you do something bad, it comes with a very large portion of shame on the side, if not a bigger portion of shame than the actual guilt, because we're taught that you need to, well, this is through like particularly Catholic religion and Christianity, which has this idea of original sin, which is the foundation piece for Western culture in general. This idea that you're bad, that you're a sinner, and you have to forgive. Like, just think about that for a second. That's a straitjacket you can never get out of. You're a sinner, and you're born a sinner, and you have to forgive. So basically, you're screwed. You're damned if you do, and there's no way out of that. And this is and we're taught that shame is good for you, that if you shame yourself enough, you repent for your sins, that you'll be better. But it absolutely doesn't stand up to reason, because shame makes you less inclined to change your behavior than it makes you less inclined to recognize that you've made a mistake, and it makes you more defensive. So if somebody says you've done something wrong and you're feeling shame, you might attack them. Even if on some level you know that you've done something wrong, but you just feel shamed, you feel attacked. Your identity is being attacked. So it makes change and transformation less possible, not more. Guilt, you can defend a little bit more, and maybe, maybe a lot of people need guilt. They need to feel bad when you've done something wrong, perhaps. But shame, absolutely not. There's no evidence that shame helps anyone ever, ever, ever. All it helps is the people at the top control everyone else. That's the only benefit that shame has. It's always about control and never about care. And you shouldn't stop doing it to yourself, because that's trying to control yourself. That's the narcissistic that you've internalized, trying to control and dominate yourself, and you can take back your power.
Very interesting. So while you were speaking to Catholicism and shame, I just sometimes feel that that was the point of confession, is to
Oh
have
yeah.
people feel that they're releasing their shame by handing it over to the priest. I don't know, but there is some sort of parallel to that, really.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a good theory, but the whole kind of foundation piece of the culture, and this goes for Catholicism and Protestantism, it just has slightly different variations of shame, but it's still very shaming. For Protestantism, it's built on really oppressed shame. We must be proper, we must be this and that. So it's like slightly different variation, but it's still shaming. It's still extremely shaming. And I mean, I come from a Catholic country. I've come from Ireland, which, has a huge dose of shame, if you like. And when you go to confession, you confess your sins, but you're a sinner. So there's always more. You can never not be a sinner. You're born a sinner. And this is the distinction between, and a lot of times when people talk about shame, they really focus on this European idea of shame, which kind of has its foundation in Catholicism. You're a sinner and you have to forgive. But in East countries and also in pre-Christian cultures, like for example in Ireland, before Catholicism came, there was kind of a tribal shame. If you stepped out what was considered okay in the tribe, you were shamed for that. But you were still shamed for behavior rather than just being yourself. And this is what we see in, the Far East, in Japan, China. There's this kind of collectivist shame, is what I call it. So a slightly different shade of shame. It's also very lethal. People do commit suicide for that, because shame is it's so self-annihilating. That's what it is. And I really feel like the kind that we have here in the West is particularly corrosive. Individualized shame is particularly corrosive because it's like, I'm bad because I'm human, because I'm me. Like, you could never, you're in that for life. You're stuck with that. At least if you've done something bad and shamed your family, you can, make retribution and, come back into line in theory in some cases. I'm not saying shame is good in either case, but with the Western kind of idea on shame, you're stuck with it forever. There's no hope.
Very interesting. I like this. It's just very close to home. And like I did say, I think that what you're talking about, a lot of my listeners would understand, those who are struggling with bulimia or anorexia or any eating disorder. And I like that you give there is a solution to it. And that's really important for someone to know. And like, again, it's awareness first, and awareness that you can break away from the shame. I love it. And I love that you say name it, because I used to talk about
Yeah,
my
and
bulimia
recognize
like that
that.
too. It's like, you're not my
Yeah,
friend.
bulimia, anorexia, all of these, addictions, these are symptoms, self-sabotage, imposter syndrome. These are symptoms. It's not the problem. There's symptoms of shame.
Yeah. So, um, the trauma matrix, if you can,
Yeah.
so is that, if you can expand a little bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I realize everyone's so afraid of AI. Oh my God, they're going to take over. Wow, what they're going to do. But I realize that that's not a real problem at all. Our real problem is the trauma that we've internalized, and that's really controlling us. So we think we're free and independent, but most of us are just a walking, talking trauma response. We're operating out of trauma responses and calling out personality. We think we're shy, but really we've got anxiety from child trauma. We think we've got, so, everything that we do. We think we're, funny and want to fill the gaps. We're not comfortable with silence. But again, this is another trauma response. So many things, pretty much everything, because we live in such a shame-fused world. We're all walking around with these trauma responses and thinking that it's our personality. We're being controlled by that. It's kind of like the puppeteer, and we think we're free, but we're actually being controlled by trauma. And the kind of code for this trauma is shame, because shame is very useful to get people to do what you want. And when we internalize the shame, there's this puppeteer, I call it the inner narcissist. It's like it's controlling your life. It's telling you you're not fat, you're not thin enough, you need more. It's whatever the BS is, you're not good enough yet. You'll never be successful. You're a failure. Whatever it's saying, whatever voice that is, whoever's voice that is, that's controlling your whole life. You're not free. You're not free until you break that cord and break the chain from that thing. So this is the real matrix. It's not AI at all. It's this inherited trauma that very few people have dealt with.
Love it. Thank you very much for that. I would really like you to let our listeners know where they can find you. I believe you have a newsletter out there as well that people can sign up for.
Yeah, I do. You can follow me on social media. I'm trauma.matrix on Instagram, all the places. I'm over on Substack, so if you want to go deeper, you can find me there, Trauma Matrix, Substack, traumamatrix.substack.com. And I also have a free gift for you guys. So if you're raising your hand and thinking, wow, I resonate with this, I do have a lot of shame, and this is a good word for it. I have a free gift for you guys. It's called 5 Signs It's Time to Break Up with Your Inner Narcissist. And it's like it's good. You're going to see yourself in this if you go through it. About 5 classic signs that you need to break up with your inner narcissist, that like now is the time, you can't wait. And it also gives you some strategies and tools about how to really make that happen. So you can find that at tinyurl.com/NotTodayNarc, NARC. Not today, narc.
I love it. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this. And like I said, I know that a lot of my listeners are going to definitely feel that they will associate with this, definitely. So again, Emma, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Larianne. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit me at bleepbulimia.com.